Okay. Hey, back at Netfix garage. This is Dax's STI Airlift suspension system. These are the top mounts on his struts here, and the bearings in them are completely worn out. So when he's turning his wheel, it's grinding, making noises. So anyways, we're gonna replace the bearings slash bushings depending on the type of struts you have, but for these, they're called pillow ball bearings. So we're just gonna show you how to take the top mount off and how to press out the bearing and how to press in another bearing. Basically, I'm just going to take off first the dampener. So this is just a self-adjusting dampener for your shock. So it just has a little Allen key, which turns an Allen inside of the top of the strut there. Just makes it softer or harder, as you can see on the dial. This is all loose already because we've already done the work. This would just be a lock nut basically, which is a 19 mil on this one. 17 mil is for the strut rod. If the strut rod and everything's still tight, there's an Allen key, a larger size also inside the top of the rod that you can hold with so that you can free up the tightening nut. We're just gonna pull this baby off. And then we're just gonna lift this top mount off. So there's the top of the Airlift strut where it sits. It's a McPherson style system, so as you turn your steering wheel, this strut is going to be turning, and all the weight of the vehicle is basically sandwiching between your strut mount and the top of your suspension. So it's common, I'm not sure about airlifts that they wear out, but definitely a common failure on all vehicles. You start just turning your wheel and it starts shaking, and you can notice that, and it's definitely your bushing or your bearing, because there's sometimes Torrington bearings. And on this one, they call it a pillow ball bearing. So here's the mount. It's just like a hind link in here, and then on the back side, we just have these 4 Allen screws. So basically this bushing here goes between that pillow ball bearing. Everything rests on top of that, between here and your top of your strut rod. Undo these 4 3 mil Allen screws, bearing out. All right, so now that we have this little cap off that retains the bearing, as you can see here, we're gonna need to press that out or punch it out. So as long as we support this piece when we're driving it from the other side, close as we can to the actual bearing that will be pressing out. That way we're not going to bend any of this mount. Ideally, we had a socket that was just larger, and you can put it in the vise like this, have a smaller socket on this side and press it through. You just want to make sure that everything is as even and in line as possible. I'm using a 34 mil now because the 32 mil was a little tight to allow space for the bushing to go through and into the socket. But yeah, you can use a press, or we're just gonna use this vise because we can, and it's more common that people have a vise than a hydraulic press.
Hey guys, so Dax just ordered these online via airassisted.com, it looks like.
Airlift Performance Pillow Ball Bearing 11294.
This is the box that came in. 2 little pillow ball bearings. Just gonna open this bag. So here's the old bearing. It's got like all this hard wire almost coming out of it. It's pretty stiff and rough feeling. Just doesn't even, yeah. Anyways, this is the new bearing. And it's obviously gonna be really stiff, but it's gonna be smooth and not worn out like this one. We just decided to replace both front bearings because they are the ones that move the most all the time, and they were the ones that we were having issues with. You can also replace the rear airlift suspension top mount bushings too. We're just deciding to do the fronts right now though. And these bearings, the 11294, are the same bearing that are in the rear. So that all 4 are the same. Dax had to call to find out exactly what the part number was, and it's a kind of a pain. So for your reference, they're all the same. As you can see, where the bearing presses into this top mount, it's actually painted. So it's in good shape. You don't really need to clean that up too much. I'm just gonna wipe it with a Scotch pad quickly and then some brake clean, and I'm gonna clean up this surface so that the cap, the bearing retainer, just sits perfectly flush. If you have like mini bore wire brushes, mine here aren't as small as I need for these tiny little threads. Or if you have like a thread restorer or tap, you can definitely run them in there just to clean any crud out, any corrosion that might cause an issue with you removing those little screws later. You're gonna wanna make sure that this area where you bottom out the bearing is definitely free of any debris or corrosion. So anytime that you're dealing with pressing in a bearing, you're always gonna wanna press on the solid part of the cage of the bearing so that you don't damage the bearing balls or between the bearing and the cage. For this one, we've got a 7/8 socket that fits perfectly on the solid part of the bearing. And we're just gonna press it in like we did press it out. And if you're trying to start the bearing, you always want to start it so that it is even all the way around. Try not to start it like this because your studs are pressed in also. So if you're gonna, even though you can put even pressure on it, you might end up pounding your studs back out. So make sure you either have something supporting that part of the mount. And I'm just gonna try and get this a little bit. You can definitely hammer any bearing in with, as long as you're working it evenly around. But since we have the press, it's just, in my mind, a nicer install if it goes in evenly the entire way in. This is where shallow sockets are nice, but pressed it in until it was bottomed out. It's perfectly flush with the bearing cap. And now it's time to install the bearing cap. We're gonna clean this bushing up just where it sits. And I'll probably put one of those wire bore brushes into there just to give it a clean up too. A bit of a Scotch pad on there to clean all that up.
Basically, this is the nut and the bottom part of the bushing that goes between your the bearing. So the nut that actually holds your mount onto the top of the strut rod all presses between the pillow ball bearing. Take this bore brush. All right, she's ready to go back in. All right, since that just all bottoms out together, now you can just hold the Allen top of the strut rod and tighten down your 17 mil nut. Just your lock nut that goes on top, 19 mil, and the little dampener adjusting. Make sure that you get it into the Allen. You can purchase all these parts separately also online. Probably next year when we service these again, we'll actually replace those bolts and that rusty bearing plate and possibly even more pieces, but they can all be purchased separately. So here's the rear shocks. The top mount is a little smaller, same type of dampener, also same little lock nut, same bushing nut here. You can also just do the same steps we just did and then pull this mount off, and on the bottom side of the mount there is the same bearing plate that holds that bearing in. It's just kind of hidden in there so you can't see it. So we got 4 hoses. They're just a braided line. I imagine you can get these built to the size that you need at most local auto stores, but these ones came with the Airlift suspension kit. They just thread in with a pipe thread fitting in the bottom of the airbag. You're gonna want to use thread sealant, liquid thread sealant, or Teflon tape. We're out of our liquid thread sealant from all other jobs we were doing. We're gonna put that on these threads just to have no air leaks. And then it comes with one fitting that is a pipe thread, 1/4-inch pipe thread on one side, and this is a air brake fitting. So this just pushes onto a plastic airline, and when you're removing it, you push the airline in, and then you want to squeeze this guy in, and then you pull the airline out to release. Okay, so if you are using Teflon tape, you're gonna want to make sure that you get it in there pretty tight, and the direction does help a lot. So you see how the tail has ended in that direction. So when I go ahead and turn my other thread on, it's gonna be going with the direction of the tape. And instead, if I put it on the other way, it can just start pulling, unthreading the tape that you just threaded on. This is the end of the Airlift suspension rebuild. If you follow along, you're going to see us install these later on in the STI build series. We'll see how low you can go. Stay tuned for our STI build. It's our next series coming up. We're going to try and hit you with a new episode on the same build week after week after week. It's going to be about 10 episodes, so subscribe, like, follow, comment down below. Check us out on Instagram, Dax.STI, and see more gorgeous shots of Dax's beautiful STI.